Of course, the question is, what is Boxing Day? What are the origins of Boxing Day? What I love to hear is people's explanations of Boxing Day. Why? Because it doesn't tell you about Boxing Day, but it tells you about the people giving the explanation. And as a kid, I thought Boxing Day was a day when there was boxing, the sport. No, this is not the case. I also thought it was universal, that this was a thing. The whole world celebrated Boxing Day. When I first went overseas at the age of 6, I remember being looked at with confusion as to what Boxing Day was. And I didn't know how to process that. When I try to remember it now, I don't know if my analysis of that experience is colored by 40 years of being away from that experience. Then I had the belief, because it was told quite logically and calmly by someone I looked up to and respected and still do, that it was a day that people returned all of their gifts to the stores. I thought this for a long time. And I then, of course, realized that if that were true, then why is it only in the Commonwealth that this happens? And if it's in the Commonwealth, therefore it's in Canada, Australia, the UK, why would it skip over these certain places? And then you realize, okay, well, if that's the case, then it must have originated in the origin of the Commonwealth being the United Kingdom. And then you say, okay, well, what was happening in the United Kingdom? Well, at that point, you can only mythologize. So we go back to the experts, and what is the general consensus? Two possibilities. One was a bridging to the poor, to the servants, by putting leftovers in boxes. And I remembered the almond milk today. Tastes like almond. And I have a comment on that in a moment. But what are we going back to? It was a way to bridge the divide by putting leftovers or sort of cheaper gifts into boxes to give to servants. Or it was to give to the church in boxes. This is where the idea of boxes came from. Like hampers, maybe. That's what I'm thinking. But it's fascinating that people, even today, talk about, g'day Jeffrey, things that they talk about it as if they know what they're talking about. And this is fascinating. I mean, we all do this. But as soon as you ask, where did you get that information? Oh, I heard it, or my friend told me. And this sort of seems to be the basis for what is true and what isn't when I interact with the general population. Now, that's of course a bias because I don't know what percentage is general and what isn't. But it's fascinating to see what passes as acceptable truth. And the deeper you dig into that, the more you see that so much of our society is based upon people believing things that don't hold up, g'day bio, under analysis. And the more, obviously, I spend almost most of my working day in science and mathematics, which is a very different way to organize the world, where the human ego is stripped. It's almost worthless in that you can think what you like and say what you like, but the ultimate adjudicator is the evidence. And what is the evidence? The evidence, logic, reason, consensus, analysis. But the thing is, there is a recognition that one elevates those things above their own opinion and intuition. This is very counterintuitive for the human, considering we didn't evolve for those particular things. The narratives and the tribalism is what was required, and now it's leftover living in the 21st century with these archaic constructs that now, as opposed to helping us survive in the savannah, now limit us. Now, coming back to what I was just saying, there was this guy I knew who, instead of calling it almond milk, he would call it almond milk. Now, he thought he was, well, I shouldn't say what he thought, I don't know. But his personality was one that he sort of knew everything. Well, mathematics to me, I'll talk about that because I live in that all day, and it is beautiful because I see everything as this a physical manifestation of a mathematical hyperplane, which I'll talk about later. But he used to say almond. Now, someone else picked up on this and said to me, "Oh, how come you say alchemy or you say alcohol, but you don't say almond, you say almond?" And I responded immediately. And I said, "Well, they're different linguistic origins." And the guy looked at me and said, "How would you even know that?" And I just think to myself, how do you not know that? Right? So, different life experiences, different ways of thinking. Well, the simple answer is that almond, yes, it originally came from Greek, but it passed through French. So in the classical Greek, possibly it was like amygdalish, possibly something like that. Obviously, forgive me, anyone who's Greek. Now, amygdalish or amygdala in English came straight from the Greek. But when it went through French, it became amande. They don't say almond, they say amande. Now, amande, when you move that into English, becomes almond. So therefore, when you have the word passing from Greek through to French through to English, you get almond. And when it came straight from Greek, you got amygdala, right? Hence why the L is not pronounced. It's a legacy of moving through a Latin Frankish language. All right? Now, of course, someone who doesn't know that says, well, because alcohol pronounces the L, then almond should also pronounce the L. Now, this is a rule that they have unconsciously inherited, but they're not necessarily aware that they are thinking this rule. But the person like myself who's hearing them recognizes that they are thinking this way. Now, what does that tell me about them? I don't know. But it allows me to guess that, hello, they have an opinion based upon some logical deduction that they are convinced is correct. Now, what does that say? Hello again. It says to me that this person has some degree of confidence in the conclusions they can derive and do not care if most people don't think that way. So they don't think as part of the group necessarily. Or they learnt from someone who doesn't think part of the group necessarily and discounts the validity of linguistic origins of words and how that's related to how they're pronounced differently in English. Just like enough, GH is an F sound, and phone, PH, is an F sound because one is possibly, I think, of Germanic origin and the other one is of Greek origin. One be phonic and one is enough. It would have been anach at the time, I don't know, because we say, like good night. We don't pronounce the GH, but in German they'll say gute Nacht. So, and because good night comes from the Germanic, in other words, it was in our Anglo-Saxon language prior to the advent of 1066 with the Battle of Hastings and the loss of the Anglo-Saxon king being murdered in the war or killed, and then William the Conqueror taking over England, and then of course forcing everyone to speak French, even though the lower class only spoke Germanic. The French words filtered down. We ended up getting 40-something% of our vocabulary now being French. And you can see that change when you look at the Lord's Prayer. We've done all of these in the past. Now, the mathematical hyperplane, what's interesting about it is that all of the beautiful laws of physics have their origins in mathematics, but not all beautiful laws of mathematics have their origin in physics. It seems as if it is nested in one direction. And I use a lot of these beautiful mathematical worlds to solve problems. So one problem I'm working on now is a problem where I had to construct multiple universes in mathematics, which it does not mean they exist. I'm not saying they exist, I'm not saying they're real, but a mathematical alternate universe, and that the solution was a combination of all of the different universes, and taking a slice of those. Anyway, it was a pleasure to talk to you. I need to get back to maths, and I'm going to finish my coffee over there. And as always, enjoy your Boxing Day, or your non-Boxing Day if you're not in the Commonwealth, and don't forget life one smack at a time.